Welcome to Crime Case Confidential, where today we examine a shocking case of betrayal, power, and tragedy. A sheriff's affair with a teenager leads to pregnancy, and what follows is a grisly murder that ultimately ends in another. Join us as we uncover the disturbing details of this twisted case and explore how an illicit relationship spiraled into deadly violence. Sheriff Paul Anderson was a well-known figure in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. At 46 years old, he had been serving in law enforcement for over 2 decades. People in Hattiesburg looked up to him for his strong leadership and charming personality. However, behind the badge, Paul had a darker side. He was carrying on a secret affair with 17-year-old Kelly Harper, a local waitress at a diner. For several months, Paul presented himself publicly as a devoted husband to his wife of 20 years, Linda Anderson. The reality was far more complicated. Linda, a respected schoolteacher, had long suspected her husband's infidelity, though she maintained a calm and collected exterior. The whispers of Paul's behavior had been eating away at her. For years, she had chosen to stay in the marriage for the sake of their children and to keep up appearances in their tight-knit community. Paul's controlling and sometimes abusive nature put a strain on their relationship, leaving Linda feeling trapped and resentful. Kelly, on the other hand, was young and vulnerable. She was easily manipulated by Paul, who promised her financial stability and a better life. She had recently graduated high school and dreamed of going to college, but those dreams faded as her relationship with Paul deepened. Though she tried to stay hopeful, Kelly grew more anxious over time, especially as she felt Paul pulling her further away from her friends and family. When Kelly found out she was pregnant, everything changed. The young waitress felt trapped in a situation she had no control over. Paul was furious when she broke the news, quickly becoming cold and distant. Though he had charmed her early on, Paul had no interest in fathering another child, especially one that could threaten his reputation. This love triangle created a storm of emotions for everyone involved. Kelly was scared and unsure of what her future would look like with a baby on the way, while Paul felt the weight of his actions and the potential public fallout. For Linda, the affair and the pregnancy were devastating blows. She had spent years enduring Paul's controlling ways, but the thought of her husband fathering a child with a girl nearly the same age as their son, Michael Anderson, was too much to bear. In the days leading up to his death, Paul's once powerful persona started to crack. The pressure of the situation was becoming too much, and everyone in this twisted love triangle could feel that something had to give. On the morning of June 28, 2009, Sheriff Paul Anderson was found dead in his own home. It was around 8:15 a.m. when his longtime neighbor, Stephen Harris, noticed something was wrong. Stephen, a retired postal worker, had gone outside to fetch his morning paper when he saw that Paul's front door was slightly ajar. Stephen knew this was unusual since Paul was always particular about security, given his position as sheriff. Concerned, Stephen decided to check on his neighbor. When he stepped inside, he immediately noticed signs of a struggle. The living room was in disarray, with cushions thrown around and a broken vase on the floor. Stephen's heart raced as he made his way to the master bedroom, calling out Paul's name, but there was no response. When he reached the doorway, he froze. Paul's lifeless body was sprawled on the bedroom floor, lying in a pool of blood. He had been shot multiple times, and blood spatter covered the walls. The grisly scene was unlike anything Stephen had ever seen. Shaking with fear, Stephen quickly backed out of the house and called 911. "There's been a murder," he told the dispatcher, his voice barely steady. Within minutes, emergency responders were on their way. When the police arrived, they found Stephen outside, pale and visibly shaken. He explained what he had seen, and officers quickly entered the home. They later described the crime scene as chaotic and violent. It was clear there had been a confrontation. Paul had been shot in both the head and chest, as well as in the genital area. His service revolver, which was used in the murder, lay on the floor near his body. The house had other evidence of a struggle: overturned furniture and shattered glass, but nothing had been stolen, leading investigators to believe this was a personal attack rather than a random robbery. Detective Angela Moore immediately called for a full forensics team, and the investigation into the murder of Sheriff Anderson was officially underway. The small town of Hattiesburg was about to learn that their beloved sheriff had been hiding far more than they ever imagined. The police arrived at Paul Anderson's house within minutes of Stephen Harris's 911 call on June 28, 2009. Detective Angela Moore, a 15-year veteran of the Hattiesburg Police Department, led the investigation. Known for her no-nonsense approach, Moore immediately began assessing the chaotic crime scene. The house was in disarray, with furniture overturned, glass shattered, and a pool of blood surrounding Paul's body in the master bedroom. Paul had been shot 3 times, once in the head, once in the chest, and once in the genital area. The shots to the head and chest were consistent with a calculated murder, but the wound to the genitals stood out. Detective Moore and her team theorized that the shooter had aimed at this area deliberately, perhaps as a sign of anger or revenge, suggesting a deeply personal motive. It wasn't just about killing him, Moore would later say. This was about sending a message. The fact that Paul's service revolver had been used in the attack pointed to someone familiar with his life and routines. Forensics teams were called in to comb the scene for more clues. They carefully photographed the blood spatter across the bedroom walls and gathered evidence from the shattered vase and overturned furniture. There were no signs of forced entry, leading investigators to believe Paul had known his attacker and likely let them into the house willingly. This detail, combined with the gunshot wound to his genitals, suggested the crime had been driven by emotions, perhaps rage, jealousy, or betrayal. By late afternoon, the police had pieced together a rough timeline of events. Paul had likely been attacked late the night before or in the early hours of the morning. His wounds, the lack of stolen items, and the overall condition of the house confirmed that this wasn't a robbery gone wrong. This was a targeted killing, and the message sent by the genital wound hinted at personal or sexual motives. Detective Moore and her team were now focused on uncovering who had reason to want Paul dead. As they gathered evidence, they prepared to question those closest to him, knowing that in a town as small as Hattiesburg, dark secrets wouldn't stay hidden for long. Linda Anderson, Paul's wife of 20 years, was one of the first people the police questioned in their investigation. When she sat down with Detective Moore on the evening of June 28, 2009, Linda's demeanor was composed, but her words told the story of years of unhappiness and betrayal. Linda admitted that her marriage to Paul had been in trouble for a long time. She explained that she had suspected for years that Paul was unfaithful. "I just knew," she told the detective. "There were too many signs." She detailed how she had frequently found evidence of Paul's infidelity in their shared SUV. It started with little things, stray hair clips or unfamiliar perfumes. Then Linda found a thong under the passenger seat, followed by used condoms tucked away in the glove compartment. Each discovery confirmed what she had feared. Paul was cheating on her. Her suspicions were finally confirmed in the most shocking way possible. About 4 months before Paul's murder, Linda came home early from her job as a school teacher and caught him in the act. She opened the door to the living room and found Paul and Kelly Harper, the 17-year-old waitress, having sex on her couch. "I couldn't believe it," she recalled to the police. "I just stood there frozen, my husband sleeping with a girl young enough to be his daughter." The betrayal was too much for Linda to bear. She confronted Paul immediately, but he was dismissive, telling her that what she saw wasn't a big deal. "He said it was just sex and that it didn't mean anything," Linda recounted, her voice trembling. "But it meant everything to me." As if the affair wasn't enough, Linda soon found out that Kelly was pregnant with Paul's child. Linda overheard Paul on the phone with Kelly discussing the pregnancy late one night. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her husband not only having an affair, but about to have a child with someone else. Linda had put up with so much for so long, but this, for her, was just too much. The revelation of the affair, followed by the news of Kelly's pregnancy, had pushed Linda to her emotional breaking point. She felt humiliated, angry, and utterly betrayed by the man she had once loved. She told police she just wanted it to be over her marriage and her life. Despite her painful admissions, Linda remained calm during the interrogation. She denied any involvement in Paul's murder, insisting that, although she hated what he had done, she hadn't killed him. The police, however, saw her as a key suspect, and her motive, years of betrayal and anger, was clear. Kelly Harper, the 17-year-old waitress, had been swept into a complicated and manipulative relationship with Sheriff Paul Anderson. When police questioned Kelly, she described how Paul had promised her a future far beyond the life she was living. Growing up in a small town as the daughter of a single mother with a checkered past, Kelly had big dreams, but few means to achieve them. She had dropped out of high school and was stuck working late shifts at a local diner, living paycheck to paycheck. When Paul entered her life, things changed. Kelly told the police he promised her the world, that he could take care of her and give her everything she wanted. Paul, who was nearly 30 years her senior, convinced Kelly that he would buy her a house, support her financially, and even take her on vacations. He once told her he was planning a trip for them to Gatlinburg, Tennessee, a dream vacation for Kelly, who had never left Mississippi before. These promises made Kelly feel like she had a future she could look forward to. Paul's power and charisma made it hard for her to see the darker side of their relationship. However, things took a turn when Kelly discovered she was pregnant in late April 2009. After weeks of feeling nauseous and fatigued, she took a pregnancy test. The result was positive. Kelly was stunned. She had never planned to get pregnant, especially not with Paul's child. "I didn't know what to do," she told the police. "I felt trapped." The pregnancy made Kelly feel conflicted. On one hand, she thought Paul would keep his promises of financial security and provide for both her and the baby. On the other hand, she knew deep down that Paul had been lying to her. His promises of a life together felt hollow, and she feared he would abandon her now that she was pregnant. The pressure mounted, and Kelly began feeling isolated, not knowing who to turn to. Her situation became even more complicated when Linda Anderson, Paul's wife, confronted her. Kelly described the terrifying moment when Linda showed up at her apartment one afternoon, shortly after learning about the pregnancy. She knew everything and accused Kelly of ruining her marriage. Linda was furious, and "I didn't know what she was going to do," Kelly recalled, trembling as she recounted the incident to investigators. Kelly felt overwhelmed by guilt and shame, caught in a love triangle that was spiraling out of control. She told police that while she wanted to escape the situation, she never intended for things to get violent. Her vulnerability and fear made her a suspect, but she insisted she didn't have the strength or anger to murder Paul. Still, her pregnancy and affair made her deeply involved in the case, and police saw her as a key figure in unraveling the truth. The twist in the investigation came when police dug deeper into Paul Anderson's affair with Kelly Harper. During another intense interrogation, Kelly broke down and revealed the disturbing details of how Paul had been manipulating her for months. The officers were shocked as she described the emotional stranglehold Paul had on her life. It wasn't just the promise of a house or a trip to Gatlinburg that kept her in his grasp. Paul had gone much further. Kelly explained that her mother had a history of run-ins with the law, and Paul had used his position as sheriff to manipulate her further. He threatened that if Kelly ever left him or revealed the pregnancy, he would use his influence to make life even harder for her family. "He said he could ruin us," Kelly sobbed. The fear and pressure this created made Kelly feel completely trapped. As the police listened, the gravity of Paul's manipulation became clear. This wasn't just an affair that had spiraled out of control. It was an abuse of power that left Kelly feeling terrified and cornered. Detectives felt anger and disgust at Paul's exploitation. One officer later described Paul's actions as a shocking abuse of trust and authority. But there was more to the story. Kelly also revealed that she had briefly dated Paul's son, Michael Anderson, before becoming involved with Paul. Michael and Kelly had ended their relationship just months before she and Paul started their affair. Michael had no idea that his father had stepped in as her new lover. The discovery of this prior relationship added another layer of complexity to the case. Michael, who had been estranged from his father for years, had already confronted Paul after finding out about the affair, though he was unaware of the pregnancy at the time. This twist in the investigation opened up new motives and dynamics between the key players. Detectives began to wonder if Michael had a role in the murder or if Kelly's actions were driven by fear of Paul's threats. The manipulation Paul exerted over Kelly and the tangled relationships within the Anderson family left investigators piecing together a puzzle that had become much darker than they originally expected. Michael Anderson, 21, was no stranger to trouble. Described by locals as a wild card, Michael had a reputation for being promiscuous and quick-tempered. His relationship with Kelly Harper had been turbulent from the start. Kelly eventually broke up with Michael due to his unfaithfulness. He was known to cheat on her with several women and even a couple of men. Friends of Kelly reported that she had been deeply hurt by Michael's behavior, and the final straw came when she discovered that Michael had been seeing other women behind her back. What made the situation even more alarming was Michael's violent reputation. Despite his quiet demeanor around strangers, Michael had a dark side that surfaced in his relationships. During police interrogation, Kelly revealed a shocking detail. Michael had physically abused her on multiple occasions. In a tearful confession, she admitted that she had been pregnant with Michael's child before their breakup, but Michael had beaten her into miscarrying. The police were stunned by these revelations, adding another layer of tragedy to Kelly's story. When Michael learned that Kelly was now pregnant with his father's child, his rage only grew. According to those close to him, Michael felt humiliated and betrayed, not just by Kelly, but by his own father. Discovering that his father, Paul, had not only stolen his girlfriend, but also gotten her pregnant, was too much for him to handle. Friends described Michael as feeling completely shattered and out of control after the news broke. One friend recalled Michael storming out of a local bar after hearing a rumor about Kelly's pregnancy, visibly upset and muttering about taking care of it. During his interrogation, Michael's anger and frustration were palpable. Police described his demeanor as volatile, noting that Michael struggled to contain his emotions throughout the questioning. When confronted with the accusations, Michael denied any involvement in his father's murder, but his hostility toward both Paul and Kelly was clear. Police later stated that Michael's rage was hard to ignore. Though there was no concrete evidence linking him directly to the crime, Michael's motive for murder was certainly strong. His father had betrayed him in the worst possible way, and Kelly's pregnancy was a constant reminder of the pain he had suffered. But despite his violent reputation and past abuse of Kelly, Michael maintained that he had nothing to do with the crime. On the night of June 27, 2009, Linda Anderson finally snapped. After years of suspicion, betrayal, and humiliation, she could no longer tolerate the lies and manipulation from her husband, Paul. The discovery of his affair with Kelly Harper and the fact that Kelly was pregnant with his child was the breaking point. For months, Linda had been quietly seething, her anger building to a boiling point. She felt trapped in her marriage, disgusted by the man she once loved, and consumed by the weight of her husband's infidelity. That night, Linda confronted Paul in their living room. The argument started like so many others, but this time, Linda had a plan. As Paul tried to brush her off, dismissing her concerns as paranoia, Linda grabbed the gun that Paul kept hidden in the closet. With trembling hands and her heart racing, she pointed the weapon at her husband. In a cold, quiet rage, she fired a single shot, hitting Paul in the groin. The police later theorized that the location of the wound was not a coincidence. It symbolized Paul's betrayal of their marriage. Paul fell to the ground, bleeding profusely, and Linda watched as the man she had spent years with lay dying at her feet. In that moment, a flood of emotions washed over her. Relief, guilt, anger, and fear. She felt justified in her actions, believing Paul had deserved it for everything he had put her through. But at the same time, a deep sense of dread crept in. What had she done? Linda attempted to stage the scene, dragging Paul's body toward the garage in a desperate effort to make it look like a robbery gone wrong. But it didn't take long for the police to see through the ruse. When detectives arrived, they quickly noticed inconsistencies in Linda's story, and forensic evidence pointed to her as the primary suspect. The gun used in the murder was registered to Paul, and there were no signs of forced entry. Under interrogation, Linda broke down, confessing to the crime. The weight of what she had done finally hit her. As officers placed her in cuffs, Linda felt a strange mixture of resignation and regret. She had hoped that ending Paul's life would bring her peace, but instead, it brought her nothing but sorrow and the cold reality of a life behind bars. In January 2011, Linda Anderson faced trial for the murder of her husband, Sheriff Paul Anderson. The courtroom was filled with family, friends, and curious members of the Hattiesburg community. Monica Green, Linda's defense attorney, argued that Linda had been driven to kill Paul due to years of emotional abuse and betrayal. They employed the cheated wife defense, claiming that Linda was a victim of her husband's infidelity, which ultimately led to a breaking point. Green presented evidence of Paul's long affair with 17-year-old Kelly Harper. Testimonies highlighted how Linda had found disturbing evidence of Paul's cheating, such as used condoms and women's underwear in their family SUV. Green painted a vivid picture of Linda as a woman who had been pushed to her limits, and that Paul's callous behavior was the catalyst for the tragic confrontation that led to his death. Frank Collins, the prosecutor, countered with a different narrative. He argued that Linda acted with premeditation, having confronted Paul multiple times about his infidelities. The prosecution aimed to show that Linda was fully aware of her actions when she shot Paul. They described the crime scene, emphasizing the brutality of the murder and the emotional toll it had taken on the community. As the trial progressed, Linda's family attended every session, hoping for a positive outcome. Linda appeared calm, but inside she felt a whirlwind of emotions. She was anxious about the possibility of spending years in prison. The community's reaction to her case was mixed. Some sympathized with her plight, while others saw her as a murderer. After days of testimony, the jury deliberated. On January 21, 2011, they returned with a verdict. Linda was found guilty of second-degree murder. The news hit her like a punch to the gut. The emotional toll of the trial and the verdict weighed heavily on her. Linda had hoped for a lighter sentence, believing that her difficult circumstances would be considered. Instead, she faced a lengthy prison term. The judge sentenced Linda to 25 years in prison, which left her feeling devastated. Tears streamed down her face as she realized she would be separated from her children for years. The verdict sent shockwaves through the Anderson family, who had long been respected in the community. Friends and family felt a mix of relief and heartbreak, unsure of how to reconcile the woman they knew with the crime she had committed. Linda's trial and subsequent sentencing highlighted the tragic consequences of infidelity and emotional abuse, leaving a lasting impact on everyone involved. After Linda Anderson was sentenced to 25 years in prison for the murder of her husband, the lives of those involved took dramatic turns. Linda was sent to the Mississippi Correctional Facility for Women in Pearl, where she faced a stark reality. Many of her days were spent in solitude, reflecting on the decisions that had led her to commit such a tragic act. The guilt weighed heavily on her heart, knowing that her actions had shattered her family and brought pain to the community of Hattiesburg. Linda's children were left to navigate their lives without their mother's guidance, while Linda struggled to find a sense of purpose behind bars. Meanwhile, the aftermath of the murder trial brought unexpected changes in the lives of Kelly Harper and Michael Anderson. After the trial, Michael reached out to Kelly. They had a complicated history, having dated before she began her affair with Paul. Michael had always been known for his promiscuous nature, but his feelings for Kelly had remained strong, even after everything that had happened. The two shared a bond over their troubled pasts, and both were trying to move forward from the chaos that had consumed their lives. In early 2011, just a few months after the trial, Michael and Kelly rekindled their relationship. They began to see each other more often, meeting at local coffee shops and parks in Hattiesburg. Slowly but surely, they found comfort in one another. Michael, who had a reputation for being violent in the past, showed signs of change as he focused on becoming a better person. He started attending therapy sessions, working on his anger issues, and trying to be a supportive partner to Kelly. By the summer of 2012, Michael and Kelly decided to take their relationship to the next level. They announced their engagement during a small family gathering, much to the surprise of those around them. The couple married later that year in a modest ceremony at a local park, surrounded by close friends and family. For them, it was a chance to build a new life together, free from the shadows of their past. As for Linda, her time in prison was marked by her struggle for redemption. She participated in therapy programs and worked hard to reconnect with her children during visits. Although her actions had led to devastating consequences, she hoped that one day she could regain their trust and be part of their lives again. The fates of Linda, Kelly, and Michael illustrated the complex nature of love, betrayal, and the consequences of choices made in moments of despair. Each was trying to navigate their lives in the wake of a tragedy that had changed them forever. A sheriff, a scandal, and a murder. The story of Paul Anderson serves as a stark reminder that power, when misused, can lead to devastating consequences.